Someone knocked on the door. A teenage girl opened the door and saw a delivery service courier standing in front of her. She said that her parents were not at home and asked to come or call back later. The courier returned later, but this time it didn't end so well. The Steve family lived in this house. The head of the family is 39-year-old Steven, his wife 33-year-old Katie, and their 5 children, 15-year-old Cassidy, 13-year-old Brian, 9-year-old Emily, 7-year-old Rebecca, and 4-year-old Zachary. The family was very friendly and happy. They were famous for their Christmas parties and Halloween celebrations among the neighbors. The Steve family lived in a prosperous area of Houston, Texas. It was quiet, cozy, and safe here. Steven has worked in real estate for many years and recently opened his own small agency. Katie was a housewife who devoted all her time to children and household chores. She always supported her husband. On that very day, the 9th of July, 2014 year, in the morning the family was visiting my grandmother. In the afternoon after returning home, the parents went to the bank, and the eldest 15-year-old daughter Cassidy stayed to look after her younger brothers and sisters. Someone knocked on the door. The girl opened the door and saw a delivery courier standing in front of her with a parcel in his hands. She said that her parents were not at home. Cassidy didn't get a good look at the courier's face. She asked to come or call back later and closed the door. The courier returned after a while. The girl opened the door and said that her parents were not there yet. At that moment, she looked more closely at his face and realized who was standing in front of her. It was 33-year-old Ronald Lee Haskell. He was her Aunt Melanie's ex-husband. When Ronald realized Cassidy recognized him, he said he wanted to see Melanie. The girl replied that she was not at home. Cassidy became worried and began to close the door as soon as possible, but that only made Ronald angry. He kicked the door with all his might so that the girl was thrown to the floor. The man broke into the house and took out a gun. It turned out that instead of a parcel, he had a rolled-up blanket in the package, which he was going to use as a silencer. The children were scared. They hugged and held together, begged the man to leave, but it didn't affect him. Ronald held them hostage while waiting for their parents. When Steven and Katie arrived from the bank and entered the house, Ronald pointed a gun at them and, threatening them, demanded to tell Melanie's location, but they refused to talk. Steven and Katie knew that Ronald was a violent man, so Melanie divorced him, and now she was hiding from him. Ronald took their mobile phones from them and ordered them to lie face down on the floor. Katie understood what he was up to. She jumped up and screamed no. Then he shot her in the face and began to shoot all the family members lying on the floor, in turn, the back of the head, not sparing even the children. He shot 4-year-old Zachary in the shoulder. The boy jumped up and ran to his father, who had already been shot. Ronald approached him and callously shot him in the head. When it was Cassidy's turn, the bullet miraculously bounced off her head, but the criminal did not notice it. The girl, seeing what had happened to her brother, lay motionless. Ronald thought everyone was dead and left. He took the keys to the Honda car, which was parked near the house, and left in the family's car. After he left, Cassidy called at 911. A teenage girl said that Ronald Haskell shot their entire family and everyone is dead except for her and her brother. She could hear him wheezing. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene and found a terrible picture inside the house. 6 people were lying on the floor with their hands on the back of their heads in a huge pool of blood. All 6 were no longer showing signs of life. Cassidy is the only survivor. She suffered a minor head injury. She underwent the necessary treatment and fully recovered. the girl moved to live with her maternal grandparents. It was she who was able to tell all the details of the monstrous murder. The girl told the police that the killer was stalking her aunt and bothering their whole family. He threatened them. She assumed that Ronald had gone to her grandparents, where Melanie lived, whom he was looking for. It turned out that Ronald fled the scene of the crime in the family car Honda, and this car was put on the wanted list. It was urgent to find a dangerous criminal before he harmed anyone else. The police went to the house where Melanie lived, and on the way, they found a Honda. They blocked Ronald's passage, and he stopped. But the man refused to get out of the car, pointing the gun at himself. The criminal was surrounded by 50 police officers with weapons in their hands. They demanded to get out of the car. In response, Ronald said that he had problems with his head. He demanded to talk to his brother, who lived in California, and said he did not want prison. Negotiations with him lasted 3 hours, until Ronald finally got out of the car. The criminal was arrested and charged with capital murder. He was held behind bars without bail. After being discharged from the hospital, Cassidy and her grandfather and uncle took part in an event in honor of her family's memory. 600 multicolored balloons were released into the sky. Cassidy quoted one of her favorite Harry Potter books. "Happiness can be found even in the darkest times, as long as you don't forget to turn on the light. I know that my mom and dad Brian, Emily, Becca, and Zach are in a better world, and one day I will be able to see them again." And also, the girl said that she remained strong. The police began to study the information about the criminal. It turned out that Ronald had been charged with several charges of domestic violence from his ex-wife. Ronald and Melanie got married in California in 2002. They had known each other since elementary school. The couple left their hometown and settled in Utah. He deliberately took his wife away from her family in order to isolate her from her family. The problems started almost immediately after the wedding. He brainwashed her into thinking that no one needed Melanie, not even her family. Ronald subjected his wife to physical, sexual, and moral abuse. 4 children were born in the marriage. He beat his wife even during pregnancy, and then began to beat the children. Ronald earned little by working as a courier. There was not enough money for their large family, but at the same time, he did not allow his wife to work and even leave the house, so that Melanie could not communicate with anyone and complain about him. But one day in the 2008 year, Melanie was lucky and she was able to call the police. Ronald accidentally left his phone unattended, and after another beating, Melanie grabbed the phone and called the police. Melanie was sent to the hospital, and Ronald received a suspended sentence of 8 months. But this did not stop him, and after his wife returned home, the beatings resumed. Ronald became even more angry at his wife's act and threatened to kill her family if she reported him again. Melanie was very scared and obeyed. In the year 2013, Mel's patience did not come to an end. She and the children ran away from home while Ronald was at work and settled in a shelter. The woman filed for divorce and for a restraining order, which she soon received. Melanie contacted her sister Katie and asked for her help. Katie and Melanie used to be very close, and Katie couldn't leave her sister in trouble. She took Melanie and her 4 children away from her tyrant husband to their parents in Houston, Texas. They were safe there. Melanie and Ronald's divorce was finalized on February 14, 2014. The parents received joint custody of the children. Melanie at the same time received primary custody, and Ronald had to pay her alimony in the amount of $700 a month from his small salary. Ronald moved to live with his parents in California. He was forbidden to approach Melanie and her family, as well as the school. The man had to undergo a psychological check to determine how emotionally stable he is, and whether he will be able to communicate with children, but he never passed it. While living in his parents' house, Ronald began to take out his aggression on them and beat up his elderly parents, older sister, everyone he knew and who tried to help. Once, when he found out that his mother was communicating with Melanie, he attacked her, tied her up, tied her to a chair, and strangled her until she lost consciousness, and then left. The sister found the mother and called the police. But Ronald got away with it, and he continued to abuse his family. The sister got a restraining order against him and moved in at home. Ronald's family did not understand why and at whom he was so cruel. He grew up in a loving and caring family, was popular at school, a football player, became the king of the prom. He had a lot of girlfriends. Ronald has never been abused and bullied to become like this. No one could believe that the sociable, funny Ronnie would turn into a killer monster. And then, he decided to take revenge on his ex-wife and went after her, but instead killed her sister's family. It turned out that Ronald was not registered with a firearm. He stole a gun from his ex-girlfriend and bought more than 200 rounds of ammunition in a gun store. Ballistics examination showed that the gun found with him matched the casings near the bodies of the murdered family. Notes with murder plans were found in his notebook. He initially planned to kill his ex, her parents, and Melanie's sister's family to get revenge. It became obvious that the crime was not spontaneous. Ronald initially planned this terrible crime and wanted to take the lives of many people. If Cassidy hadn't called at 911 right away and the cops hadn't stopped him, he would have killed Melanie, her parents, and many other people. A memorial was erected in front of the house of the deceased family. Neighbors, relatives, people who were just not indifferent to this tragedy went to the house and carried flowers. Melanie felt guilty for her ex-husband's actions. She didn't understand why he killed his sister and her family and not her. Due to the hurricane, the courthouse was badly damaged and the trial was postponed. And it was only on the 25th of August 2019 that it finally began. Ronald was facing the death penalty, and the prosecutor decided to seek such a punishment. At the trial, the accused fainted so much that he had to be put in a wheelchair. The lawyer said that the defendant is scared and needs a mental health assessment. Psychiatric examinations showed that he is changeable. He had just been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The psychiatrist was sure that he was faking a mental illness in order to avoid responsibility for his terrible act. He was previously diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder. During his stay with his parents, Ronald tried to commit suicide 3 times, but to no avail. Ronald confessed that he killed the family, but claimed that the voices in his head ordered him to do it. So they promised him to return his family, so he went to the crime, although he did not understand what he was doing. The prosecution provided CCTV footage of the places Ronald visited before the murder. Hotel, shop, cinema. On the recordings, he looked absolutely calm and reasonable. It didn't look like he was insane. The defendant's brother said that Ronald was very angry at Katie, who helped Melanie and the children escape, and wanted to take revenge on her. Ronald's ex-wife, Melanie, confirmed that he had been stalking her and threatening to kill the whole family, and notes in his notebook confirmed that he had been planning all this for several months. There was no doubt that this was not a sudden insanity. 19-year-old Cassidy was the main witness and testified against Ronald. She grew up noticeably, was a student at Brigham Young University in Utah, and was already engaged to her boyfriend. The girl told about all the horrors she had experienced in the house at the time of the murder, and was amazed that Ronald did not even repent of what he had done. During the 5 years he spent behind bars awaiting trial, he did not think about the crime and did not regret anything. Ronald was found guilty and sentenced to death by injection. He is currently on death row awaiting execution. If you liked my work, please like this video. Let's discuss this story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you all, and bye.